All right, so you are listening to SynthWorld on WSLR 96.5 FM Sarasota and WBPV 100.1 Bradenton. And I'm your host, DJ Nomad. And I am with post-rock kind of ambient IDM artist, Richard Alfaro, and New Mexico based. Is that right?
Yeah, I live up in Los Alamos right now. It's just north of Santa Fe.
Very cool. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you being here. And I want to just dive into your background a little bit, like I always do. So if you can, we have you pinpointed now in New Mexico. Where are you from originally?
So originally I'm from Puerto Rico, but my family moved back and forth a lot between there and the US. So kind of grew up all over the US, South Carolina, a little bit of Georgia. Probably spent, the majority of my time in Texas, El Paso, Texas, specifically. So,
Okay.
and now I'm living up in northern New Mexico. It's great.
Yeah, so you've been all over. As we learn about Richard's current whereabouts, we uncover seismic influences in his music production.
Well, I definitely don't do music full time. It's just a thing I do on the side for fun for the most part. My full time work, I actually work as a seismologist, which has some interesting overlaps with music. There's a lot of audio signal processing type stuff that are similar between the two. I actually got into seismology because of music because I saw it was very similar to music. So yeah, my daytime job is basically studying seismic waves that are related to explosions, and I work for a national laboratory up here in Los Alamos.
Man, that's pretty cool. And honestly, not like a huge surprise. I feel like a lot of the artists that are kind of in this area have some sort of like nature, scientific background or influence in their music or the way they think.
Yeah, I mostly got into it because it just looked like music. It's when you work with music, you're looking at like, waveforms all day, and it's the same thing. I do the same thing for work, so it's kind of, well, I enjoy both of them.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So do you ever like incorporate the sound waves that you find at work in your music, or is that not?
Not really. I find that my scientific type work actually draws more inspiration from my music writing. It's like I'm always telling people I work with it, like the DSP, like digital signal processing, that's available in the audio world is like maybe like 50 years ahead of what we can what we can do with seismology. So it's like it goes the other way, which is interesting.
Well, so now like explain to me how you got into this whole like subgenre of music. And then, actually, first off, how would you describe your own music? Did I kind of hit it?
Oh, I think you described it perfectly, which is that it's like hard to describe, right? It's like this weird intersection of like indie, but like electronica and IDM sort of all mixed together, right?
Yeah.
I don't, it's a really hard genre to define. I just kind of call it like electronica, or you know, you get these things from Spotify where they kind of like classify you like as like a genre as an artist, and I usually get the indie tronica classification by Spotify. So if that's
Hey, indie Tronica.
useful at all.
Okay, I would say
um,
like electro rock or something maybe too, but
yeah,
I don't know.
it's just a mixture of different influences. Really reflects kind of like my roots and like the music that really inspired me early on.
And so now was that like you playing instruments, I'm guessing? It feels like you probably do play instruments.
Oh, oh God, I'm terrible at playing instruments. I sometimes I'll look up keys and chords and just like kind of mark them on the piano and play around that way. But for the most part, I end up just like, you know, programming things in on like my DAW's piano roll, like for the most part. It's just, and it's a lot of experimentation. I wouldn't say I write in any traditional sense of like I'm really terrible at playing instruments.
Well, that's okay. So you use a lot of like VSTs then, I'm guessing?
Um, well, yeah, most of it's digital. I've got a I've got a couple of synthesizers back here I actually do mess around with, but it's like mostly like programming in like different MIDI sequences. So
Right,
and modern like recording, a lot of this stuff is just MIDI that's written out. So
right.
you can pull up a virtual piano and just draw in where you want notes and stuff like that. So that's a lot of what I do.
Yeah, and
But
that's
yeah, I just
really common nowadays. But I will say that's a testament to your abilities, though, because a lot of it does sound like it's organic and analog, if you will. So,
oh it's I just follow the flow. I just intuitively sort of latch on to different ideas that I guess I would say they're sort of randomly generated, and I just kind of follow that and build my music around that for the most part.
okay, so it's kind of an amalgamation. Richard continues on to describe his musical expression as unconscious and free flowing.
Like I said, it's like very unconscious for me. So it's like it's like chasing an unconscious idea. Like you're just kind of following like the vibe of where things will lead you. Usually it'll be some sort of melody that I just put together, and I'm just trying to see where that takes me, in terms of like what fits with it, like you know, how drums might like wrap around that, or what chords might work with that. And like I said, I'm really terrible with chords. I have to look things up all the time. But it's just and it's a lot of it is sound design too, because like what really inspires me is like the intonation of like the instrument kind of design this vibe that you just kind of try to make flow in a musical sense. It's really, for me, it was listening to a lot of other artists and trying to break down like how are they tracking out stuff, like what kind of organization do they put around a song. And it's, I think a lot of the structure of behind my songs comes from like just listening to a lot of other people's music over time.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. And that actually leads me to a good question for you because, I can think of a few artists myself that really do kind of dominate, if you will, this sub area of kind of indie electro music. And obviously, like Tycho's the biggest one.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Ryan Farish, Echo Soft is really good. VIQ has released stuff recently that's really in the same area. But are there other influences beyond that have really shaped your sound?
I really got into music back in middle school and high school, and it was kind of like the MySpace era. So you would just like go around people's profile and bump into different genres of music that people were posting on MySpace. Early on, I actually got into electronic music because I wanted to make like an electronic like hardcore band, which is really kind
Okay.
of funny.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And that's how I first started learning how to write. And then from there I kind of like bumped into breakcore, which is a big thing back in the MySpace days. Actually, I don't know if you heard of Mr. Kitty, but he used to make great breakcore back then.
Okay.
Aphex Twin is someone else that would be considered sort of breakcore-ish. And back then there was also Venetian Snares. I think he's still around actually. So I think that influenced me really early on, but like the turning point I'd say was when I bumped into Tycho's music actually.
Mhm.
So I was just like browsing around MySpace and I bumped into this really old track. I think it's called The Disconnect. And I listened to that and I was like, whoa, this is some really I
That's older
yeah
stuff.
I hadn't heard any electronic music like that before, and it like really changed my perspective on what you could do with electronic music. It was just so different. And then of course a couple of years later, um, Dive came out, and that had a huge influence on my songwriting and still does today.
So, I mean, I want to ask you about that. It seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, it had been a few years since you had released Refract, your first album, which I just had the chance to listen to, was phenomenal. So, did you take that whole time off writing? I think that was 2019. Am I right? Is that you had kind of a gap there?
Yeah, I wasn't releasing so much, and that was partially because I moved up here to northern New Mexico as a job change and stuff. But with the more recent album, I think I was trying to blend a lot of influence. It's not just from like taiko, but I've always been really into like alternative indie, like Circus Survive. So I was trying to really, you know, blend, these very guitar driven indie type vibes with like the very synth driven, nostalgic ambient sort of IDM feel. I didn't take the break on purpose. It was just like it just took me a while to set my studio back up. And with the job change and stuff, it took me a while to like get settled in there. So I decided to put music to the side for a little bit.
You know, I mean,
But
do you feel like that space, that time helped you evolve? I mean, there's definitely an evolution that's happened from Refract to Slow Sun. So
yeah, it's I think my sound's consistently evolving, and part of that is like I get really into the production side of things. Like I always want to make things sound better. So it's like I'm always trying to figure out how to better compress something, or, you know, come up with a different chain of effects that has like a new sound or sounds like something that was interesting that I heard in another song. Um, so I think when it comes to that album specifically, it was just like really getting inspired by learning new techniques. Like I said, going into the album, it was really, I was really motivated to like improve my production skills overall. So that played a big part of it. I was trying to like refine like how I did drum programming, and I think that really came through in this one.
mhm.
And it really kind of refined my guitar tones a bit. That was like my main focus going into this one. I was obviously really inspired by other artists in this genre, like VIQ and Division Street. I mean, they're putting out some really great stuff, and I think the writing process behind this album, it was kind of just experimenting with new sounds that I learned how to generate, really, and new techniques production wise. I think the first track I wrote for the album was Moments, which is like the second track down the album list. And, once I kind of wrote that song, it's like the vibe of the album just kind of took shape around that. It was just like I wrote this one song and it inspired me to write the rest of the album pretty much. I do everything from sound design to mixing to mastering.
It takes a long time.
So it can be really time consuming for me to like really get to the point where I feel like an album's ready to release. So like I stopped writing from 2019 to like 2022. I was writing things, experimenting with different things in that time frame, but I wasn't really like trying to write an album or write, finish anything really. I was just trying to experiment during that time. Um,
After catching up to his current releases, we dive into how he creates a distinctive sound amongst his peers.
I really think that every songwriter has a unique sound or voice per se. Like, and once you get comfortable with songwriting and, whether that you come from a traditional background of, learning how to write music or not, what really matters is sort of cultivating like a confidence in your style, because over time, as you learn to do production, you kind of, you're writing things, but it's always going to be your own style. You can try to like mimic other people, but I've found that doesn't really produce like, at least for me, satisfactory music. So it's really trying to like hone in on like your individual sound and trying not to compare yourself too much with other people's music. Like you can be influenced by other people, but don't you don't want to like sit back and go back and forth like, does my song sound exactly like this artist did or that artist did? It's just about honing like your own unique take on what you think music is.
So really, truly embracing your own sound, because you're right.
Yeah, right.
Even if they try to emulate or want to sound like this artist or another, they always have their own unique flavor. So, and you do as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
So and what I know this album is still fresh, so we're probably a ways away from new Richard Alfaro music, but
Oh no, we're not.
oh, okay, well, cool. Let me know. Let the listeners know what's next.
I've already got, so since the album released, I think I've written like 19 tracks.
Oh,
So I've got maybe a full album and maybe a separate EP I might release. But I'm trying to really narrow down what songs I want to finish and which ones I don't. I don't have a name for the album yet or anything. I haven't even named any of the songs. I think going forward, maybe within like the next 6 to maybe 8 months, we'll probably have another 2 albums or so.
good to know. So, okay, the other question, big question then is we've got music coming, which is going to be great. What about performances? Is there, any interest in that?
I'm always open to opportunities to perform. I haven't like pursued that avenue yet. So nothing planned right now. But I'm always open to opportunities if something comes up.
Okay. Now, have you collaborated? Well, two good questions here for you. I want to know, just came to mind. One, how has the reception been of Slow Sun? And then two, have you since then started collaborating with other artists in the scene more? Have you met these people at all?
I've met a couple people through Stratford Court. I haven't started any active collaboration. I was floating some ideas with Division Street, a little while back, but we haven't quite found anything that we've decided to work on together yet. Um, don't really have any active collaborations right now, unfortunately. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
That's okay.
Um,
There's nothing wrong with that. I will see if I can facilitate something though, because there are a lot of cool
I'll,
artists in the scene that I think you would match up well with.
I'd be happy to work with anyone. So.
I want to put a pin in this. It's been so fun chatting with you, and I'm excited to know you have more stuff coming this year. Maybe we can have you back on to discuss new releases. But for all of our listeners here of SynthWorld, where can they find more of your music, and then where can they find more of you if you're out there?
So I'm on most of the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, X. I should probably delete that one. Just generally you can find me on social media under Richard double underscore Alfaro. You can find my music streaming on Apple Music, Spotify, SoundCloud if you don't want to pay for a streaming service. And it's also up on Bandcamp for the most part. And yeah, if you're looking for, if you want to buy a record, I think we might still have some in stock on Stratford's website. But we've sold out on Bandcamp. So
That's awesome. Okay, well, you heard it from him. Check out his newest album, Slow Sun. Check out his first album as well, Refract. Great album. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you. Again, you're listening to Synth World, and this is New Mexico-based indie electronica artist, Richard Alfaro, Alfaro. Thanks again, man. Any final words for our listeners?
no, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk with you on here. And, if anyone wants to collaborate, reach out.
I will definitely see if I can facilitate any of that, and hopefully we can have you on in the future, man. Appreciate it.